Welcome to the Cultural Arts Center for Conversations and Coffee today on this 8th day of September. I'm Ellen O'Shaughnessy, coordinator of the program. I am delighted to introduce to you Bill Hoy. Bill's wife, Deb. Deb, stand up here for us. Yes. And I tell you, you're the one is the reason why we're here, because you were on the elevator with Todd Camp, and the two of you were talking about the history of the Cultural Arts Center and said, you really got to have my husband, Bill, to tell the story. Because our friend here to my right worked for Mel Dodge in the very development of our Cultural Arts Center and Bicentennial Park, too. And that was dedicated, this wonderful place, June 18th, 1978, 44 years ago. And as we know, Mel Dodge worked selflessly to make this city better. And by his side was our guest, Bill, a true artist in administering and bringing about some of the vision that Mel Dodge had. He couldn't do it all himself, could he, Bill?
He believed in a team effort.
Yes. And then, in addition to that team, is Jerry Bourne, who also worked with Mel. And Jerry's wife, Lois, is with us. Mel would love this. We were just talking about ongoing life and inviting Mel to be with us today. We're speaking of someone whom I knew too. I was working for Human Services, and I was working with Dale Crawford, a judge. And what I was doing was helping, I guess you'd say helping. I was assisting, kind of in the spirit, bringing about a better way of serving time for some of the people who were in jail. And this was Crawford's idea. Give them service. Take them out to those who need, serving the working and homeless poor. And with that vision, I was doing this with Dale Crawford and interviewed by television. And Mel was right at the top there, working with Dale. And I was asked, well, do they enjoy this? Do these people serving time enjoy this? And I said, oh, yes, but one of them said to me, I'd much rather be playing basketball in jail. And so Mel loved it, but he said, Ellen, I can't believe it. You told that story. But that was the corner of humor and fun that it was to work with Mel. I felt free to be able to say that. Now, about you. You're a lifelong Columbus, Ohio resident. Graduated from Eastmore High School, attended Ohio Wesleyan University for 2 years, then graduated from Ohio State University as first in his class of 1971. Bill majored in business administration, computer, and information science. He worked for the university budgets and administrative research and as an intern in public administration with the Ohio State University Masters in Public Education program. Bill worked as a budget analyst in the City of Columbus Department of Finance with a responsibility for the budget of the Recreation Department of Parks and Forestry, the Workhouse, and Columbus Zoo. When Bill graduated with his Master in Business Administration from OSU in '72, he started with Recreation and Parks from '72 to '81. And through all these years, beginning in '72, Bill met Mel Dodge while developing budgets. There was at this time a city charter to merge recreation and parks with forestry to create the Columbus Recreation and Parks Department. Bill was offered the position of administrative assistant and started this position in 72. In 79, Bill became the first assistant director of recreation and parks. Wow. And as you left to join your company that your father started, what, the Columbus Sign Company?
Actually, my grandfather started.
Oh, wow.
We're the third generation.
And you're still there to the present time. Wow.
I'm aging, but yes.
That's great. In 85, Mel Dodge appointed you to the Columbus Zoo Board, and you served on the Columbus Zoo Board and Aquarium Finance for what, 37 years plus?
Something like. I'm still on the
Yeah.
finance committee. I'm not on the active board anymore, but I was a past president and worked closely with our dear friend Jerry. And yeah, Mel got me in there and kept me going.
Well, thank you, you and Jerry, keeping the spirit of Mel Dodge alive among us and telling this great story to Todd Camp on the elevator. And you're bringing us, Deb. Thank you. Okay, take it away.
Thanks, Ellen.
Uh-huh.
I think it's appropriate that there's animals here, Jerry. That's not quite Elsa, but Mel over the years raised, when he got the zoo, had the opportunity to take a few animals home. And you'd think, maybe you'd take, a small little this or that. He took Elsa, the lion, home from when she was young. And I remember going over to his house when Elsa first got there, and she played, and they had this nice little lazy boy chair down there, and it was fun and everything. And then about a year and a half later, when I visited back there, the chair was still there. Nothing was on it. All it was just wood and whatever. But he had an amazing touch with animals and people as we go through that. I want to start off with clarifying a few things. When you mentioned about Todd and Deb being on the elevator, truth be told, I this is what, 6 months ago, something like that. I get this crazy text from my wife that says, I'm trapped on the elevator at the Cultural Arts Center. And, and I look at it and say, oh, I said, well, good luck. I'm 15 miles away. I don't know what I can do to do whatever. And she keeps sending me these frantic little things back and forth about, So the bottom line is, after 20 minutes or so, they got her out, and everybody was wonderful, the Cultural Arts Center that worked with her to get through all that kind of stuff. But I think that's the time when she blurted out, that's a bad word, she said something to the effect that, well, my husband worked on the grant that built this and worked with Mel Dodge. And I think what she was really saying is that I probably cut some money on the elevator type thing, and probably should have spent a little bit more money on that. But at any rate, from there, it got to Ellen, and of course, Ellen is like a dog with a bone. Once she gets, she's there, and we went through these various iterations, and really, this is an art center, and the only art that I could provide was this. This is a Columbus Monthly article back from July 1975. Now, Columbus Monthly started in 1975, so this is maybe the 4th or 5th issue or whatever. And that's a picture of Mel Dodge on a swing set with the heading, "The Most Powerful Man at City Hall." And it's an article that's pretty amazing, because here's the most powerful man at City Hall. He's not an elected official, okay? He wasn't appointed by the mayor. He was appointed by a Recreation and Parks Commission of people and his constituency was all the public went through there. And he was the most respected person in City Hall and had the ability to get a number of things done over the years. And to go back to Mel's, just a little bit of history on Mel. He was born like in 1924 from New California, if you know where that's at. It's up there near Marysville, close to Plain City, Union County. And Mel, he didn't talk a lot about his past life or whatever, but he did mention he was a track person. He did some athletics and all that kind of stuff. Was in the service, and didn't talk a lot about that. But I finally got out of him. He was in the military police, which made sense to me. wanted to have control and take care of things or whatever. Ended up at the Ohio State University and graduated in 1951 with a degree in education. And started out, which most teachers did at that time, you know, in the summer or whatever, if you didn't have a job, you were a playground leader. You know, you were on the playgrounds, you were working with kids. From 1951 all the way through 1967, he held basically every leadership position in the Department of Recreation. Different than Recreation Parks, Department of Recreation, separate entity. And there was a Recreation Commission. And in 1967, when Nick Barrick retired, who was the Recreation Director at that time, they appointed Mel Dodge to be the new Director of Recreation. And he began to amass his, let's call it an empire, as he put all this together. But his whole idea of how to work and manage was participatory democracy. And as a result, he would have, each of these recreation centers had an advisory council. And that advisory council might have anywhere from 9 to 21 people in it. And he empowered them, that he was always available to listen to them. He gave them a little bit of money. All the vending machines that were there, the money that came and made from the vending machines went into these funds for the Recreation Advisory. Now, as a person that was partially responsible for finance, what a nightmare this is, to try to keep track. You know, you get audited at any point for quarters and nickels and dimes and all this stuff. But what it did is it allowed Mel to build up this whole concept of participatory democracy. As we moved on, as I worked with him, I kind of saw it a little different than participatory democracy. I kind of saw it more as a beneficial, you know, his authority and how he did things were just a little bit different as he went through getting people involved, going through that. His whole philosophy was, if everyone had 95% of the information that he had, so we used to go say, so if there's 20 people out there, if 19 of the people had the same information that he had, they'd make the same decision that he would. Now that meant we had one person out there was going to go nuts on us at one time or another. We had to figure that out. But how did he come up with that information? Well, what he did is he had people, whether it be myself or Jerry or other people that were out there, that would listen to the community, would go out and work with the community, would work with the recreation centers, leaders, go through all that stuff, and provide the information to him. Interestingly enough, when you looked at Mel's desk, it was perfectly clean all the time. Glass top on it, whatever. Mel didn't make a lot of reports or do a lot of that kind of stuff. He would have us give the reports. He would review them. He would understand them. What he did have was this magic little black book, okay? Now, nowadays, we have our cell phones and we have everybody's phone number and all that stuff. Mel, in this little black book, had the phone numbers of all the influential and powerful people in the city of Columbus. And he had worked with them by performing and being able to produce success throughout, and he could call them up. As a result, Mel knew his ways to do stuff. Eventually, when he had animals at the zoo, he would, on Mr. Galbraith, John Galbraith's birthday, he would take anything from, I'd actually heard that he took a baby elephant at one time up the escalator up on 100 East Broad Street to say hello to Mr. Galbraith on his birthday. John Walton Wolfe, who is the titan of the Dispatch or whatever, could be a very gruff person, but Mel and him were very close friends. Mr. McConnell worked closely with the zoo and worked with Mel. It was just great to kind of see how he had been able to do that. But moving a little bit on, so Mel at 1967 became that recreation director. All while this is going on, there's a division of Parks and Forestry, which is part of the service department for the city of Columbus. Now keep in mind that Mel was running up to 126 playgrounds, and majority of those were on parks or schools that butted onto parks. And there was always this thing about, well, the recreation department would cut the grass to here, and Parks and Forestry would cut it to there, and there'd be this 1-foot strip where neither of them wanted to decide what to do. I mean, that's, you know, not really necessarily a true story, but it's kind of embellished a little bit of how the thought was on that. So Mel came up with the idea, and again, with his constituency and the backing of these powerful people, to initiate a city charter which would merge the Department of Recreation with Parks and Forestry, which would come out of service, to create a new division. Now, within Parks and Forestry, within the Service Department, the zoo kind of existed. And it kind of existed kind of on its own as it went out through there. It wasn't really under Parks and Forestry, but it was kind of buried in between there. Yeah, it was in the Service Department as they went through that stuff. So Mel had that in the back of his mind too, that when this all occurred, the zoo would become under its auspices. Now the zoo is a separate 501c3, the Zoo Association that runs through there, but it gets funding from the city of Columbus, and so you need to have somebody to oversee that. So this all occurred kind of right when I was working at the Department of Finance. I had come in as an intern. I was a year behind Jerry. Jerry was in the public administration program also, and we all were lucky to get internships. Jerry got his early with Rec and Parks and got to and he'll tell you a little bit later about his experiences setting up a summer lunch program and moving on through some of those kind of things. I, in the finance department, had to work with budgets, and so I had to meet with Mel Dodge. Now, I was a kid. I was like 23 years old, but, at Eastmore, I played on all the playgrounds and stuff, and I knew the name Mel Dodge. I'd never met him. It can be somewhat intimidating at times. I mean, Mel also, it's interesting. When he was younger, and particularly in high school, he stuttered a lot. And he worked through that and to the point where you could barely tell that he did. It was only occasionally. And he would use it for his own benefit as he would go through this stuff. We would sit in meetings with people, and I'll use the Cultural Arts Center as an example. Mel had the opportunity to acquire, I shouldn't say acquire, to lease this particular piece of property because of his contacts originally with Governor Rhodes. Governor Rhodes was the mayor of the city of Columbus, 50, 53. In that thing. Mel knew him from there, talked to him, and Governor Rhodes said, sure, we're going to work this out. I'll have my people get with you. Well, that's all you got to tell Mel is he's just got to have a little crack in the door there, and he's going to just knock it open. So I go with him to this meeting, and there's probably 20, and I'll use this term hopefully kindly, bureaucrats that are in there from the state of Ohio that sit down and immediately said, okay, well, we're going to work out this agreement with you. Now the city of Columbus is going to be willing to pay for this and that and whatever. And this is when Mel would use his stutter. He would say, I don't know what you mean. Governor Rhodes said I could have this building. And then he wouldn't say anything. Nothing upsets a bunch of bureaucrats than when nobody talks. They don't know what to do. So they start doing stuff, and Mel just, should I call Governor Rhodes? They went through this. End result is, what did we pay? $1 a year. 99 years to have this. So his technique came back and did that about 3 or 4 years later on the bottoms where we needed soccer fields, and right below that area that's down there, Rhodes Park, named it after the governor, that always helps too. And we're able to get that again, $1 a year. I think that was for 50 years, whatever. So he created this department. I was working on the budgets. And I'd listen to him, and recreation at that point was probably 85% of the budget was salaries. I mean, they didn't have as much, they had a capital budget, but they go through that kind of stuff. So I supported him as best I could. And interestingly enough, Mel, when you think about the cities, in most cities, you got police, you got fire, you got sewers, trash collection, that kind of stuff. That's the bulk of what the money goes to. But Mel was able to get for a recreation department over 10% of the city budget. And I pretty much guarantee you could go to virtually any city in the United States and you're not going to find that. So as we went through this, I guess, I don't know if I impressed him or if I knew too much. He decided that, hey, I'm going to merge these two departments together. Would you like to come and join me? Well, the only problem I had with that, I thought would be a great idea, is I'm still in the master's program for public administration. I'm getting ready to start my second year. I said, Mel, let me look at a couple things. Can this wait till April or something like that? He said, oh yeah, sure, we can work that out. So I had to go to my advisors and stuff. Because I came from Ohio Wesleyan, I had proficiency out of some stuff, and I had certain things. And I had an advisor who was wonderful, and I was able to graduate. I didn't get the MPA that Mr. Bourne has, but I do have a master's in art. So here I am. This is the closest thing I got to art right here. So I started with Mel. And the other thing that's really, really kind of interesting too is if you go across the country, and even at the television show, it's always parks and recreation. You always see parks and recreation. Not here. This was Mel's show. Recreation was the main thing, and it was going to be recreation and parks. So once again, we're one of the very few that have that little moniker as we went through that. But as we went through this, my next 9 years with Mel and working with him was tremendous. Just the amount of progress that we were able to make in the city of Columbus and the philosophy of his ability to work with people and to work with city council and to go through all those things as we did it, it was great. So that gives you a little bit of a background. Mel served as the recreation director until 1985, I believe. At that point, he stepped down for one day and then became president of the Greater Columbus Convention and Visitors Bureau and took over for Earl Flora, who had been there before, and was there until his passing in 1991, and again was very much a part of why we have a convention center here. And interestingly enough, as you work through this, and Jeremy, know we have a number of friends, the person now in charge of the Columbus Convention Center sat right next to me in the finance department, Don Brown, and Don had to work with Mel. And Don was also Franklin County Administrator under the Franklin County Commissioners, and of course would have to work with and pacify or deal with Mel on certain situations as we go through that stuff. So a lot of this goes around. We have a lot of friends that are still around that kind of remember, but a lot of the young people, because Mel's been going for 31 years, just really can't appreciate how much he really has done for this city.
I don't know if I should ask now.
You can ask anytime you'd like.
I already said this, I didn't hear you. How did they decide to pick Dodge? I know it got named after him, I'd imagine, Dodge Recreation Center. How did they pick that particular site?
Excellent question. I'm glad you mentioned that. You get a star plus for that. Sunshine Recreation Center, which was right down there. That's where Mel actually started. His first was a recreation director there. That was his home base, and the people that I don't want to say played under him, that he actually worked with, both the Dorian brothers, Hugh Dorian and Mike Dorian, both were at, and Dewey Stokes was the other person. Dewey Stokes being a Fraternal Order of Police. As an outgrowth of that, there's a number of people that went through there. Charlie Mental, who was a city councilman or whatever, again, Mel had to sometimes discipline him through the recreation department as you went through certain things. It was just incredible. The other thing about that, too, that I would like to point out, Mel also, and many people don't really remember this or know this, the Columbus Municipal Federal Credit Union, okay, that was started back in 1935, was primarily started for the police and fire. And they were always on the board of directors. They went through this kind of stuff and went through. Mel was the first non-uniformed person that was appointed to that directorship and was on that board for 20 or 25 years. That's just how much respect those people did. And again, a lot of those firemen and policemen were at Sunshine Recreation Center or at some other centers or knew Mel from there and knew what he did and just felt that his leadership or whatever would go from there. But as a result, that's why they ended up naming it Dodge Park, and very appropriately so as we go through that. So before I ramble on any further, I'm going to bring Jerry up here, okay? And most of you, Lois, do you want to talk before I get him out of the chair?
No. Did they name the park before he passed away or afterwards?
After. I think it was just after. Yeah. I think they'd been talking about it, but, some of you may know Jerry Bourne. You know him because he is the past director of the Columbus Zoo, as Ellen had mentioned. But a lot of people don't realize that Jerry got his start out of the public administration program in the Department of Recreation, and then eventually Recreation and Parks as we went through that. And he will tell you, and both of us, because we discuss this a lot, learned our management style, whatever that may be, from Mel. And we both, I can't tell you, I'm not saying it's every day, but virtually every other day or whatever, there's something I think about that Mel either taught me or showed me. So, Jerry, why don't you share a little bit about what happened with you? And
Sure, happy to, Bill. In the summer of 1971, I was in the public administration program at Ohio State, finished my first year. You had to do an internship. And the person in the program responsible said, I want you to go talk to Recreation and Parks, talk to Mel Dodge, the director. So I had my interview directly with Mel, which, excuse me, didn't last very long because Mel's a busy guy. We went in, I explained who I was, we talked about what I was going to get paid, and he said, okay, here's where you work, and so on and so on. Well, that first summer was the first year that the school, the federally funded school lunch program, extended into the summer months. That was 71 was the first year. They moved it also in the summer. He said, I want you to coordinate that program. Well, I grew up in Cincinnati, went to Ohio State. I don't know the city of Columbus hardly at all, but I learned it pretty quickly because I had to be out with the people. I had to go to the settlement houses, the rec centers, meet with everyone to make sure the lunches got delivered, records were being kept, and it was a great experience. It was a great experience, not only administratively, but the interaction with people and learning about the city of Columbus. And I did that, and then he offered me a part-time job to stay on during the school year. I did a little bit of that and then passed. So I graduated in 72, had a couple job offers full-time. I was married at the time, and my wife and I had saved about $1,500 to go to Europe. And my wife Lois is here. So I said, why? And a couple people told me, go to Europe. You get a job when you come back. Don't pass up going to Europe. So we had that $5 a day book, to go to Europe. And so I went to see Mel, and he said, why don't you work for me again this summer? And I did the summer lunch program year 2. And he said, come see me when you get back. And so when I got back, I went to see Mel. And at that point in time, Mel not only built so many things physically and centers and parks and facilities, he got very involved in the social service programs. And at that time, they had an office called the Franklin County Council on Aging, and he had a grant. And he said, I want you to go work out there at the Council on Aging. I said, that's fine. And I did that, and all of a sudden the federal government passed something called the Older Americans Act. And the Older Americans Act was congregate, home-delivered meals, homemaker services, transportation, all to help elderly stay independent. Well, that money started becoming funneled through Mel's department. And it started out as Franklin County. It grew to be 8 central Ohio counties. And a good part of my career was spent in that program. And I was checking with those people. When we started out, it was very small. Today, the budget of that area agency on aging, the money they manage area-wise, is over $100 million. So what started out very small has now grown as the community has grown. And of course, I served a short period of time as Assistant Director of Recreation and Parks. And I get a call one day, they ask if I would be interested in going to the Columbus Zoo. And who would be interested in going to the Columbus Zoo? Well, I know who was behind kind of getting that going. That would have been Mel, because I wouldn't have gotten the zoo job if Mel hadn't signed off on it. But some of my memories with Mel would be, you get a phone call and you pick up the phone, and what you hear on the other end of the line is, what are you doing? I mean, so that kind of startles you for a bit. Well, this, that, the other. But that was a classic Mel lie, to call you up and say, what are you doing? But I had so many great memories. When you think about the zoo and Elsa the lion, Mel would show up just sort of out of the blue, and the keepers, they're working and they know who Mel is. And he'd just show up in the building, the herbivore carnivore, with somebody, says, I'm going in to see Elsa. when he meant going in to see Elsa, he meant going in with Elsa. I mean, they opened the door and Mel, the keepers wouldn't go in with Elsa, but Mel would go in with Elsa the lion. And one story that I think made everybody a little bit nervous, he took Greg Lashutka in there with him. Greg's shirt got torn up, and Greg didn't care, but that was just Mel's style.
Well, Greg always told me he was more worried about what if something happened to Mel, how he was going to explain how the city attorney sat there while Mel got chewed up by a lion.
But Mel did so much to get the zoo started. He could get grants, he could get things moving. Of course, he was instrumental in hiring Jack Hanna when Jack came, and just such an impact on everything that happened at the zoo. Creating a new public-private partnership. When the city and the county went together, they passed a levy that allocated money to the zoo. That first levy passed in 1985, continues today. Wouldn't have the zoo you have today without that public-private partnership. And so many good things have happened. So when you think about Mel, really, his legacy just continues. The things he started, whether it's the parks and Cultural Arts Center and all those wonderful facilities, the social programs he was involved in getting started continue to grow. The zoo, it's just amazing how he had his fingerprint on so many things. He's a wonderful mentor. I couldn't have learned from a better person how the public sector works. Mel was just so good at that, and how he followed up with people, wrote many letters for him. He'd get complaints, this, that, the other. He answered everything. And it was just a wonderful experience for me. And his wife, Nora, is still alive. She's 97 years old. I talked to her maybe a month ago, living independently in her own home, but she says, Jerry, I can't get out much. I want to get her back up to the zoo. And she declined my offer. She said, I really can't do that. But and then his children and grandchildren, they're still very involved in everything that goes on in this community.
Yeah, Mel's son, Tom, was a dispatch photographer for years, and I don't know if he's retired yet or not, but
He's retired.
he's excellent. And I remember, did he?
Tom would come here, I like him here all the time. Tom would come almost at least once a week for years and he'd be looking for something to take a picture of. So he'd come in, he'd look at the show, and he'd go downstairs. I think a lot of times he'd go to the police room after class sometimes. He'd shoot here, he'd come all the time.
Well,
He liked to drop in the zoo too, because he was always happy up there, taking pictures.
Not here today. He probably didn't know.
I don't know if I helped Tom get any of his inspiration or whatever, but I sold him an electric guitar when he was excited. He was a Rush fan at that point. So Mel agreed to it because, it includes an amplifier and it's loud. And then he got out of that, and then my brother and myself sold a canoe to him. So so this is how I kind of helped. And I remember Mel used to live, Norma and Mel used to live in a very small home right just to the south of Graceland. And there for years, and then he found a home up near Kenny Road. Kenny and Henderson was back in there. And I always remember that there was a contractor, and Mel had known him through friends, a guy named Dickie Bisciotti. And Dickie had this home for sale, and Mel thought, this is great. So they went through and they negotiated and all that kind of stuff. But, when you negotiate with Mel, you don't really understand all that you're getting into. So they'd go through this, and Mel moves in, and, something went wrong. So he calls Dickie up, and Dickie said, well, you'll just have to get a contract. And then, Dickie, you sold me the house. There, you got to take care of this. So Dickie'd come, and he'd take care of it. Well, this went on for like 10 years. Mel says, Dickie, it's a lifetime guarantee. We went through this stuff. He was a great prankster. He would do a number of different things, and he'd always have a twinkle in his eye, too, when you knew he was going to get you one way or the other. But Jerry will probably remember this, and it kind of stands out. My wife will remember it, too. It was January of 1978 when the great blizzard came through. I was living in Schiller Park in we had several homes that were owned by the parks. And to make sure there wasn't any impropriety on this, Mel had all of them appraised by Bob Weiler to just make sure there was a dollar figure. And then we would want to try and rent to our own employees simply for the fact that if somebody had a question, which they did, I'd be at Schiller Park at 2 in the morning and a dog would get in the pond and couldn't get out, and they'd come to our door and knock. And so we finally figured out how to resolve that. But the great blizzard occurred, and I got in. I think Jerry got in. Well, Mel loved crisis because it was an opportunity for him to get people together to do things and all that stuff. So Jerry's on one end trying to see what he can do to help seniors and stuff. We're trying to get a four-wheel drive groups together to deliver stuff. We take over the phone bank for the city of Columbus, and we spent the night there for what,
Yeah.
2-3 nights,
Yeah.
something like that. I had just bought a home. We had just bought a home in Thornville. And had bought it in the middle of January and had 30-day possession, so we didn't get possession in the middle of February. Had an insurance claim on that before we even moved in because everything froze, all the pipes. It was, the snow was 22, 24 inches and blew sideways and stuff. So it was just those kind of things that Mel just would take advantage of.
Yeah, I remember the blizzard of '78 very well. There would be individuals in the community with four-wheel drive vehicles, and they would volunteer. Where can we help with our four-wheel drive vehicles? So we became the coordinating part of hooking them up with someone who had food to deliver, or somebody had to be transferred to a doctor, and we were kind of the phone bank. It was you and I think Alicia Lane was in there, and Barney, yeah. So, yeah, those are the memories. The other one, early on, I think that 1971, when I had to go out in the city, Mel had a car, a little old Chevy 2, and he'd say, take my car, and I'd drive his car and go to the sites I had to inspect. Well, I'm sitting on Broad Street in his car, and somebody rear ends me, and I'm going, oh my gosh, why am I driving my boss's car and I'm in an accident? Well, the only thing Mel said to me, he says, you weren't hurt, were you? He didn't care about the car. That was Mel. And actually, I think he got a better car as a result. So.
Yeah. And I had a little car incident with Mel. I'd drive with him or whatever, and he had me go out and do something or whatever with the city car. It was one of the first times I had it, and we would park underneath City Hall. There were these spots that would go in there. And, I'm nervous. I had to get stuff out of the car and everything, so I found his spot. I parked, and I went back. And about 2 hours later, I get a call from, I think his name was Carl, the garage guy. And he says, Bill, were you planning on coming back to the car because it's still running? I had left the keys in, left the car run for. I don't think I ever told Mel that. So, sorry.
Kind of a funny zoo story. Mel was on the zoo board for years and years, and there was an animal transaction being discussed at a board meeting. For some reason, they're very common, but access to warthogs for zoos in the U.S. is difficult because they're in the swine family and they worry about disease transmission, bringing them in, and so on. So the best we could do was we found someone who would sell us a half interest in a warthog. So they're debating this thing about spending the money to get a half interest in a warthog. And Mel says, well, which half do we get? So classic kind of Mel thing,
I remember in...
Yeah, we got the right side or the left
Yeah.
side.
I remember we had all the golf courses too, and Mel had kind of put me in charge of overseeing some of those kind of things and stuff. But everybody would come to the golf course. They would always complain about the hot dogs. They, either they were too expensive, or they were too small, or whatever. So Mel has this vendor thing where he has like 8 different hot dogs, but he brings the press in, to do this. So this is how, he was brilliant on this. And he used to also hold, so they went through and they picked the hot stuff. If anybody said anything, Mel said, well, I'm going to tell you, these guys, these are the guys, and they weren't going to say anything bad about it. They went through it. But he also used to have a press golf tournament. So he would always have a tournament there, and he would have make the pros come up with some prizes and stuff like that, and we'd go through that. We'd host that every year. And, so most of the guys, Jerry, we've worked with a lot of the reporters and stuff, Bob Ruth over the years. I remember a guy, Joe Wagner, who was here early and went on to be plain dealer, was a real good friend. Jerry Kondo at the Citizens Journal that did that kind of stuff. And then there was also, you know, the video type stuff, TV type stuff. There was Uta Moss. He could be kind of testy at times, and then there was Lou Berliner. I don't know if anybody had an opportunity to meet Lou Berliner. He's a short little guy, about 5'3", 5'4". I'm telling you, he's like a bundle of energy. But Mel, of course, just figured out a way to get through that, and that's why we call that Berliner Park out there. And we had, and I don't know if we still do. At one time, we had the largest facility for softball in the United States, and I think we still do, because I know every 3 years the Gay World Series comes here through the Experience Columbus or whatever, and it's unbelievable how many teams are involved as they go through all this kind of stuff. And I think, like Jerry said, you think about all the things that were done, and a majority of these things were done in that short period of time from 72 to like 1985 that he was able to get done. And since that time, you know, it just hasn't been quite the same to keep up with the pace. I know at one point we were a $12 million budget, which was a lot of money back then. But, you know, as Jerry and Pete were talking, $120 million for...
Oh, yeah, the growth in the social service programs for the elderly, the congregate meals, the transportation, it's, when you look at the 8-county area now, it's north of $100 million being spent on those programs, all through contract. Life Care Alliance, which most people may know about, is very large. Their genesis started with the elderly nutrition program. Remember, we had the first contracts with them. And just so much has just continued on and grown as our community has grown.
Well, like Jerry said, I mean, Mel, in the social services, just in programming in general, I mean, Mel's whole philosophy was he could build a culture arts center, but then it's up to the participants and everybody in the community to bring it to life. And he would do whatever he could to put the correct people. If you'd been to the former Arts Center on Oak Street, where it was over by Parsons Avenue.
Old firehouse.
Yeah, old firehouse. And, you know, Dora Roosevelt and the people that kept that thing going with thumbtacks and tape and everything else to have this. Sorry. So that they, you know, it's great that they have a facility like this. But Mel was the same with recreation centers, the same with parks. Oftentimes, you know, when we first started, you know, getting the parks and starting to develop them, you know, we would put sidewalks in wherever we thought they should be. And after a while, Mel and me got a discussion because we would see where our sidewalk was here and there'd be a walking trail over here that went through. And we decided we'll put the walking trails in after we open the park as we go through that, and we'll put them in where the people want to walk as we go through that stuff. So again, it's just kind of that philosophy. Tennis courts. At one time, tennis courts were the big thing, and we had a number of them. They weren't without some controversy because you had lights on these tennis courts, and they're in residential areas. And so Mel came up with a system where we had controls on the lights that were only on for so long, and he would talk to the community and would work his way through that stuff. I always loved it, whether it would be at a golf course or at a softball thing. Somebody would either hit a foul ball or hit a golf ball over there, and the people would say, well, you've got to keep those things up. So we would put fences up. Okay, so if you put a fence up 20 feet, what keeps the foul ball from going 25 feet? But again, you worked as best you could with that, with the people, to try and understand. But when you think of the breadth of this whole system that he got, we at that point, when recreation parks came together, it was now 11,000 acres of park land and water land. It was 126 playgrounds. It was 25 recreation centers. It was 130 parks. So part of having parks is cutting the grass in the parks. It's one thing when you're at home and you get your mower and you go out there and you cut grass, that's fine. But now we have to travel to all these different places. So that's what I used to tell people. We've got, 5,000 acres of parkland. We have 130 parks. We spend 30 to 35% of our time on the road. This assumes that the weather is good. All it takes is, a week of rain and you get behind on that stuff. But that was part of the challenge that we would go through and do. And we had a great staff. We'd work The other great thing about when we got Parks and Forestry is we got what they called force account work. We got bulldozers, we got shovels, we got all kinds of little tools and toys that we could play with to help the recreation parks and recreation centers be better, putting playgrounds in and working through that. We had, 8 senior centers. We had boat docks, 3 reservoirs. And all those reservoirs weren't in the city of Columbus. Another story of how Mel kind of worked was Griggs Reservoir. We didn't have a park office, but Mel got wind of something from somebody that they had a house that they were willing to donate to the city of Columbus. And Mel went and talked to him and through a friend or whatever, and this person said, yeah, I'll be more than happy to donate that. And of course Mel said, and the person said, you just got to come pick it up. Go, oh, Mel, once again stuttered a little bit and went through this and that and everything. Before you know it, this guy not only donated the house, he paid for the moving of the house. It got moved over to Griggs Reservoir. We dug the foundation, we put the thing in there, and that became the park office that's going through there. And I think now it's Greg Lashutka. I think it's named after Greg.
It's named for Greg Lashutka.
Yeah.
Another kind of skill Mel had was getting legislation passed at City Council. I don't think really you were required to pass legislation that said you were intending to apply for a grant. But Mel always had put legislation in to get authority to apply for a grant. I think it did a couple things. It's sort of was a level of protection, but it was communicating to the elected officials that, hey, we're doing this grant. Later on, if the grant came through and he went back and, well, they didn't have quite enough money, they had a supplemental appropriation, he already had something in the pipeline that had been approved that was just a great way of communicating some of those things. It was masterful, I thought.
I agree. I mean, he had the ability. Another thing Mel never believed in was paying for publicity or paying for marketing or media or whatever. And he would be shaking his head at how much money we spent at the zoo to market and stuff. He would never do that. But he believed in just, you performed what you performed in those people. And then he also was great at telling those people that were in the media what he had going on so that they wanted to report that and go through that. And,
he was good at, I'd say he really kind of would leak stories. He put them out ahead of time, and it kind of endeared him with the media people because they're getting the story first. But then he put out he was maybe planning something or applying for some money, and then of course the pressure flips over to City Council. Well, it's already been in the paper, and what do you mean you're not going to support it or whatever? It's just a very smooth tactic.
It was incredible.
Deb and Lois companioning you through this journey. Might they say something? Maybe comment. Yeah.
We'll take it out into the audience.
You were mentioning the art classes here, Deb.
Well, I've just been taking classes here since earlier this year, and I have to say, I think they've taken me as an artist to the next level. The quality of the faculty that you have here, and just the people that are drawn to this community. What I found in the classes is beginners through experienced artists in each of the classes that I've been taking, and it makes a nice community that you look forward to coming to see each week. So I had an opportunity to place a piece of my art in your recent art show, and the quality of the art from the students here was really quite amazing. So while I was here before this building, when we'd walk through and it was dark and dingy when they were working on the funding and the grant development, had a chance to see it turn into a nice, very nice facility. We're very lucky to have this, I think, and the classes are very reasonable for people that take advantage of it. So that was
I think the opportunities that Jerry and I have had throughout our life has just been wonderful, things that we never anticipated would happen to us as we ventured through our own lives. But what I really value now is that I've had the opportunity with Jerry just to see how great our city really is, what we have to offer people, and I just feel very excited about almost being like an ambassador for our city. When new people come in, I have a lot of pleasure in taking them around, introducing them to all parts of our city and what we have here. And I think that's been something that I've been able to do along the way, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah, Lois has done a fair amount of that lately with the new zoo director and his wife. And I would say that the new zoo director, Tom Schmidt, is a perfect choice. He's already hit the ground running, and I think you're going to see more great things come out of the Columbus Zoo, despite the missteps in the past that we've gone through. Pretty much all been fixed, and he's got them up and going, and he's a great choice. You're going to hear a lot of good things out of him.
And you know, there was created a Melvin B. Dodge fund at the Columbus Foundation that actually funds getting people up to the zoo, transportation, that kind of stuff. Again, part of the legacy that continues to grow on through that. We had talked a little bit about, you know, the funding that came for this particular thing, but it was a period of time back there in the 70s where there were a number of programs, federal programs that were available, and they would come out and there wouldn't be a whole lot of guidelines with them to tell you what to do or whatever. But Mel loved this kind of stuff. It's a revenue sharing type thing. And the question was how aggressive you wanted to be. So Mel in the cabinets just basically told those cabinet directors that, you know, I'll take care of it. I'll put some stuff in there for the city and all that kind of stuff. And they're all kind of shrugging because they don't think they're going to get anything. Okay. So he got all of us together, and we're over at Franklin Park. There was a rec center there before the Mariflora and everything else. It was through that stuff. And we're there till, I don't know, several nights till 2 in the morning putting together these things. And I'm thinking, this is nuts. Nobody will approve all this stuff. So, and you know, you're talking about, for instance, the grant for this particular thing. You know, you put a dollar figure on that kind of thing, and you just try and figure out where it'll come and where you'll come up with the extra money or whatever. But we ended up getting, 4 Quonset huts. We ended up redoing several different things. We got something like $40 million out of this thing, and no other city, I mean, like New York didn't even get half that. It's just because we got everything in. We got it in by the deadline. We had all this stuff. We had to have architectural plans for all these Quonset huts. So Mel talks to John Schooley, and John says, well, they built something like that up in Toledo. He gets a hold of the architects for that, says, can we borrow just the basic plan for that? We just put together this stuff, end up just putting 4 or 5 names on these things and got these things built. But I remember one of my jobs, I love doing the capital improvement type stuff. I love finding matching money and doing that. Mel had me make lists and stuff, and I would put down the amount of money we had from capital and the amount of money we raised from federal money, and it was incredible. Federal, state, whatever money it would be, you know, it was like a 3-to-1 ratio as we went through this stuff. And once again, that's how we were able to get these kinds of facilities here and work our way through it. It's just unfortunate that, again, you can have the facilities if you don't have the operating budget behind it to do it. And I think that's what, unfortunately, has happened over the years, is that it's just not quite as, you haven't been able to keep up that kind of pace as you go through that stuff. But if Mel were here, it would be a different world. We talk about that all the time. How would he handle it? My personal opinion is he would adjust. I mean, the kind of his ability to do that. And I mentioned to Ellen earlier when we were talking about Mel's management style or whatever. You know, when I first came in there, I guess, and I don't mean this in a cruel way by any stretch of the imagination, but we were all out there doing our thing, and it was like we had a little choker chain on us, like when you walk your pet. And we'd go out there and we would do whatever we thought was right. And then, you know, he might get a phone call or about something like that. And that choker chain would kind of grab you around the neck. And he'd call you in and he'd talk to you. He wouldn't yell at you. He wouldn't do anything. He would just talk about what you did and where we needed to go and where we had to go from that point on. And he sent you out there. Now, if you kept getting that choker chain pulled on you, and particularly if it was for the same thing, you know, you weren't around very long. But you all learned from that, just like your dog learns to do whatever. We all kind of learned. Went through that. It was part of his benevolent dictatorship, so to speak, as he went through this thing. So,
Well, as you were saying, Jerry, in the light of all of that, Mel was such a caring man. And I was in his office as he was negotiating my taking the Conversations and Coffee 40 years ago. And I get a call into his office for an emergency for my husband. I couldn't believe it. And Mel said, I'm taking you. Where is he? I said, he's on the west side. As it turned out, it was a trans-ischemic attack, TIA they call it. And he said, we're going. Follow me. He gets in his car, and I am in my car following him. He goes through every red light you can imagine, negotiates it, knows exactly what he's going to do. We pick up Bob, my husband, and take him to an emergency room. And Mel is talking to the people saying, get him help now. And yet, kindly enough, so that they said, okay, Bob survived. I'm forever grateful. And he said to me this morning, how many years later? 40 years later? Are you going to tell that story? And I thought, I will, because you said, what a caring man he is. And you carried that through your theme, too. We are so grateful we're here, because this Cultural Arts Center is such a gift. And Mel's with us, is he not? As you are, Jerry. And Bill, you are. And all of you here. Thank you, thank you.